The storm was relentless, its icy winds howling through the streets of Austin. Emily Matthews stood in the shelter's parking lot, drenched to the bone, her rain-soaked jacket clinging to her like a second skin. The call had come at 2 a.m., David's voice urgent, almost panicked, telling her that there was something special about the dog they had just received. A German Shepherd mix, abandoned on a rainy night, and brought in with a story that hadn't yet been fully told. Emily had been a shelter worker for over 15 years, but there was something about this dog, something that stirred a memory deep within her, something that reached through the layers of grief she had built up over the years. The sound of the dog's mournful howl echoed through the empty shelter, breaking the usual quiet of the late hours. The howl wasn't just a cry for attention. It was a cry for understanding, for someone to listen. "Over here," David's voice broke through her thoughts, and she followed it down the dimly lit hall to the isolation wing. There, in a corner kennel, sat the dog, its amber eyes locked onto Emily's, a gaze full of awareness, understanding, and something more, something Emily couldn't place but knew was powerful. David handed her a soggy intake form. The name scribbled on the top read, "Zoo." "This dog, she's different," David said, his voice thick with concern. "She responds to every toy we show her, but there's no excitement, no joy. Just this longing." Emily knelt down to the kennel's bars, her hand extended toward the dog. When Zoo moved closer, Emily felt a spark, a connection, like something unspoken passed between them. The storm outside raged on, but inside, everything else faded away. The dog's wet nose touched her fingers, and in that moment, Emily understood. This was more than just a dog with abandonment issues. This dog had a story, one she was ready to share, but only with the right person. "I know," Emily whispered to Zoo, the words coming from a place deep inside her. "I know what you're feeling. I know what it's like to lose everything." The morning sun was just starting to creep through the shelter windows as Emily sat at her desk, staring at a photograph that had been her guiding light for over a decade. It was a picture of her younger sister, Sarah, with their childhood dog, Max. The photo was taken just 3 days before the accident that had changed everything. That winter morning, Sarah had been walking Max when a drunk driver swerved onto the icy road. Max had pushed Sarah out of harm's way, taking the brunt of the impact. Both Sarah and Max had died that day, and the grief had nearly torn her family apart. Emily had survived, but the guilt, the survivor's guilt, had never left her. Emily's path had shifted after the tragedy. It was during her darkest days that she first stepped into the animal shelter, looking for any kind of connection, something to fill the emptiness. A voice had told her, "You've got your sister's eyes, the kind that see right into an animal's soul." Those words had sparked something inside her. They had given her a reason to keep going. She had dedicated her life to saving and healing animals, helping them find homes and families that would love them. In return, they had helped heal the cracks in her own heart. Now, at 32, Emily was the shelter's lead behavioral specialist. Her colleagues joked that she had a sixth sense when it came to matching animals with their forever families, but Emily knew it wasn't magic. It was understanding, deep, unshakable understanding of how love could heal the deepest wounds. Zoo's arrival stirred something in Emily. It reminded her of Max, the same depth of love, the same fierce loyalty. Maybe, just maybe, Zoo had come to heal more than herself. As Emily prepared for her morning rounds, her fingers brushed the small, silver locket she always wore. A locket that held tiny pictures of Sarah and Max. She spoke softly to herself. "You're still guiding me, aren't you?" She was about to find out just how deeply Zoo's arrival would change everything. Welcome to HeartForce, where you and I find more meaning in life through stories about dogs. Before we continue, please comment below and let us know where you're listening to this video from. And if you have any stories about your dog, feel free to share them with everyone. The morning at the shelter was chaotic as usual, with volunteers arriving to care for the animals and dogs barking in excited anticipation of their morning walks. Emily, however, couldn't shake the feeling that something was different. She kept returning to the thought of Zoo, that deep, knowing gaze, the connection that had almost felt like a silent plea. She couldn't help but wonder. Was there more to this dog than anyone realized? Her morning was interrupted by a knock on the office door. It was David, holding a steaming cup of coffee with a concerned expression on his face. "You look like you haven't slept," David remarked, setting the cup down on Emily's desk. "That new dog, she got under your skin, didn't she?" Emily nodded, rubbing her temples. "It's not just her, David. There's something about her. It reminds me of Sarah, of Max. The way Max would look at Sarah, the way he understood her when no one else did." Her voice trailed off. David tilted his head, his eyes softening with understanding. He was one of the few who knew the whole story. "You think Zoo's got a connection like that? Like the one you had with Max?" Emily didn't respond right away. She couldn't. The truth was, she wasn't sure. But there was something about Zoo's presence, something that felt familiar and yet impossibly distant. It was as if Zoo was waiting for something. Maybe Emily wasn't just meant to rescue Zoo. Maybe Zoo was here to rescue her. "I think she's here for a reason, David," Emily whispered, more to herself than to him. "Just like I was meant to be here." As the day wore on, Emily's thoughts kept drifting back to the story of the Winters family, particularly Sophie, their young daughter. Emily had learned about their tragic loss when she went over Zoo's paperwork. Sophie, just 11 years old, had already lost so much. First, their beloved dog Rex had been the family's guardian for years, but in a heroic act, Rex had pushed Sophie out of harm's way when a car came barreling toward her. The car had struck Rex instead, and he had passed away in Sophie's arms. Sophie's grief had been monumental, and now, to make matters worse, they were facing the reality of losing their home due to mounting bills. Sophie's broken heart was further torn as she watched Zoo, the younger German shepherd who had been Rex's companion, grow increasingly anxious and confused. Zoo wandered the house, searching for Rex, waiting for a friend who would never come home. "Sophie, what are we going to do with Zoo?" Catherine, Sophie's mother, had whispered to Thomas one evening, the weight of their impossible choices pressing down on them. "We can barely afford food, let alone keep a second dog in our tiny apartment. We promised Rex forever. How can we give that up?" The thought of giving up Zoo had broken Sophie's heart, yet Catherine, too, understood that this was the reality they had to face. But how could they do it? How could they separate the last living connection to Rex? It seemed like a betrayal. The decision was painful. But Catherine and Thomas had reached the conclusion that it was time for Zoo to find a new family. The process wasn't simple, and the idea of surrendering Zoo made Sophie feel like she was losing another piece of herself. Catherine and Thomas were making the heartbreaking decision to surrender Zoo when the call came from the shelter. They were at their breaking point. Financially, emotionally, the Winters family could hardly hold it together anymore. They'd lost their home, they'd lost Rex, and now they feared losing Zoo, the only remaining link to their past. "Could you take her in?" Catherine had asked, voice trembling. "Could you find her a family who will love her the way we did?" Emily had hesitated. The burden of the Winters story weighed heavily on her, but she could see the anguish in their eyes. She had known that pain. She had lived it, and she had seen how animals could heal wounds that no human could touch. Zoo was more than a dog. She was a key to healing for Sophie and for her family. Emily didn't answer immediately, but a deep feeling inside her told her that this wasn't just another adoption. This was a chance to help two families heal, a chance to give Zoo, just like Emily, the second chance she needed. Later that day, Emily stood before the shelter's board of directors, presenting Zoo's case. But as she explained Zoo's background and behavior, she saw the disapproval in their eyes. They'd been through this before, families who couldn't handle the burden of a traumatized dog. It had always been a risky undertaking. Yet, Emily stood firm. "Zoo's special. She's not just another dog," Emily insisted. "I've seen it, the connection she has with Sophie, with her family. If we let her go, we're not just giving up on a dog. We're giving up on something greater. We have to try." Her words hung in the air like a challenge, one that few were willing to take on. But deep inside her, Emily knew that the fight was worth it. Zoo wasn't just an animal. She was a bridge, a beacon of hope, a healing force. It had been a week since the Winters had reluctantly agreed to surrender Zoo, and a shelter had officially taken her in. Yet, despite their decision, Sophie's grief only seemed to deepen. She would sit for hours by the window, her small hands clutching Rex's worn collar, staring out at the empty yard where Rex had once played. Zoo's absence only amplified the loneliness that had settled in the Winter household. "Mom, I want to go to the shelter today," Sophie whispered, tears running down her cheeks. "What if they give her to another family? What if she forgets about us?" Catherine tried to soothe her, brushing a hand over Sophie's tangled blonde hair. "Zoe won't forget you, sweetheart. She'll always remember the love you gave her." But Catherine's own heart was breaking. As a mother, it was her job to protect Sophie, to hold the family together in the face of this overwhelming loss. And yet, everything she had worked so hard to protect was slipping through her fingers. In a moment of desperation, Catherine reached out to the one person she could trust, Emily Matthews at the shelter. Emily had been working with the animals at the shelter for years and was known for her unique ability to connect with the most traumatized pets. Catherine hoped that maybe Emily could help Zoe heal, just as she had healed so many other animals. The phone rang that afternoon. Emily's voice was steady but warm when Catherine explained her worries. "I know this is hard, Catherine," Emily said, "but maybe it's time for Zoe to find a new home, somewhere she can thrive. She's been through so much already." Catherine's heart sank. She wanted to believe Emily, but the thought of giving up Zoe was still too painful. "I'm just not sure anymore, Emily. Everything feels like it's falling apart. Sometimes, letting go isn't about giving up," Emily replied softly. "It's about giving them the space they need to heal, and sometimes that healing comes in ways we don't expect." Catherine wasn't sure if she believed it, but one thing was clear. The Winters could no longer keep Zoe. She had become a constant reminder of what they had lost, a reminder that was slowly breaking them all. Meanwhile, Emily was feeling the weight of her own past. As she sat in the shelter office that evening, a picture of Sarah and Max by her side, memories flooded back. She had lived through the pain of losing a sibling, losing a dog. She understood what it meant to grieve. She understood what it meant to feel like you were losing everything, but she had also seen firsthand how animals could heal hearts. Zoe was different from the other dogs Emily had worked with. There was a quiet wisdom in her eyes, a deep understanding that seemed beyond her years. As Emily observed Zoe's behavior, she realized that Zoe was carrying something more than just the weight of her abandonment. She was carrying the weight of a family's love. A love that had been broken, but was still, somehow, trying to piece itself back together. "I need to find a way to help," Emily thought as she gazed at Zoe through the shelter's fence. "This isn't just about finding a home for a dog. This is about healing two broken families." Later that week, when Emily met with the Winters, Sophie clutched her mother's hand tightly, her eyes wide with hope. "Do you think we could keep Zoe, even just for a little while?" she asked, her voice trembling with uncertainty. Emily looked at the young girl, seeing the raw vulnerability in her eyes. "What if I told you that there's a way for you to stay connected to Zoe, to help her heal, just like she helped you heal?" Sophie's face lit up with a glimmer of hope, but Catherine wasn't so sure. "What do you mean?" she asked warily. Emily explained her idea, a shared custody arrangement. It wasn't perfect, but it would give Sophie and her family a chance to stay involved in Zoe's life without the pressure of full ownership. They would share custody with another family, a family that had the resources and stability that the Winters simply couldn't provide. "It's not about letting go completely," Emily said softly. "It's about allowing both families to heal, about giving Zoe the chance to give back what she's received." Catherine was silent for a long moment. She could see the hope in Sophie's eyes, the desperate need to hold on to the connection she had with Rex, with Zoe. Finally, she spoke. "I don't know if I'm ready to let go of her," Catherine whispered, looking at Sophie, whose eyes were now filled with tears. "But maybe this is the only way." Emily smiled gently. "Sometimes The greatest love we can give is the willingness to share it. Let's try this together. The decision wasn't easy for either family, but they agreed to move forward with the shared custody plan. It was a risk, a leap of faith, but sometimes the greatest risks lead to the greatest healing. The shared custody arrangement wasn't without its challenges. The Winters and the Martinez families came from different worlds, one struggling to stay afloat, the other established but still carrying the weight of their own personal losses. The transition was rocky, filled with uncertainty and moments of doubt. The first few weeks were the hardest. Sophie and Isabella, despite their shared bond with Zoo, struggled to understand their roles in this new setup. At times, it felt like the love they had for Zoo was being divided, stretched too thin between two homes. Sophie found herself missing Zoo with a ferocity she hadn't expected. She'd been so certain that Zoo was meant to be a part of their family forever, and now, every exchange, every weekend visit, felt like a reminder that nothing in life was guaranteed. Isabella, on the other hand, retreated deeper into herself. Her anxiety attacks had returned with a vengeance. Without Luna, her therapy dog, she had become silent again, and the only comfort she found was in the steady presence of Zoo. But even that was starting to feel like it was slipping away. The two girls, once so eager to bond, found themselves in competition for Zoo's attention. The dog was a source of comfort and love, but now that love was stretched between them like an invisible thread, fragile and taut. "She's supposed to be with me," Sophie whispered to her mother one evening, tears slipping down her face. "I don't want to share her. Not like this." Catherine pulled her daughter into her arms, trying to find the right words, but nothing seemed to help. "Honey, I know this is hard, but maybe sharing her is what will help us all heal. Zoo isn't just ours. She has so much love to give, and sometimes love doesn't divide, it multiplies." But Sophie didn't hear her. All she could feel was the emptiness of Rex's absence, the gnawing pain of losing Zoo in the same way. Every time she looked at her dog's collar or walked past Rex's favorite spots, the grief would rise up in her, threatening to pull her under again. At the Martinez home, Isabella spent hours each day trying to fill the void left by Luna. She had always been a quiet girl, but Luna's presence had given her the confidence to speak, to be heard. Now, without Luna, Isabella's silence had returned. It was as if the world had closed off from her once more, leaving her trapped in her own anxious thoughts. But Zoo, in her quiet wisdom, never pushed Isabella to speak. She would simply lay beside her, her presence a constant comfort. At night, when Isabella's fears would grow too loud, Zoo would nudge her hand gently, reminding her that she was not alone. Zoo's presence was the bridge between the two girls, the connection that they both desperately needed. Still, even the moments of peace were fleeting. When the two families met at the shelter for their weekly exchange, there was always a sense of tension in the air. The emotions were raw, the guilt of not being able to provide a stable home for Zoo hanging over everyone. But then something began to change. Sophie and Isabella slowly started to understand that they didn't have to compete for Zoo's love. The dog wasn't a replacement for Rex or Luna. She was a new connection, a healing force that had brought them together in ways neither family had anticipated. Zoo had the ability to help them heal, but only if they allowed her to be a part of both of their lives. The breakthrough came one Saturday afternoon. Sophie and Isabella were in the Martinez's backyard, sitting together on the grass. Zoo had always loved to play fetch, but today she seemed different. Instead of playing, she lay quietly between the two girls, her head resting gently on their laps. Sophie looked at Isabella, her eyes still red from crying earlier. "I miss Rex so much," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Isabella, who hadn't spoken in days, finally lifted her head. "I miss Luna too," she murmured, her voice shaky but stronger than it had been in weeks. "But we still have Zoo, don't we? She's not Luna, but she's here, and she's trying to help us." Sophie's heart ached, but in that moment, something shifted inside her. Maybe she didn't have to let go of Rex to love Zoo. Maybe Zoo could be a piece of the healing they both needed. Emily had been watching the two girls from the shelter window, and as she saw the moment unfold, she couldn't help but smile. This was the breakthrough she had been hoping for. The love that Zoo offered wasn't just a comfort. It was the bridge that connected these two broken families, healing them in ways they never expected. The months following the breakthrough were filled with both triumphs and struggles, but each step forward felt like a victory. The shared custody arrangement began to feel more natural, less like an experiment, and more like a bond that was meant to be. The two families, once strangers, had found a rhythm, a dance between them that revolved around love, patience, and understanding. Isabella's anxiety lessened with each visit. She began speaking more openly, even starting to share stories about Luna and Rex, the dogs who had shaped her life in such profound ways. Sophie, too, began to find healing. She stopped clutching onto Rex's collar so tightly, and while she would always miss him, she began to understand that Zoo wasn't a replacement. Zoo had a special place in her heart, just as she had in Isabella's. One evening, as the families gathered at the Martinez's home for their weekly dinner, Sophie and Isabella sat side by side, talking and laughing as they taught Zoo a new trick. The dog responded with her usual enthusiasm, rolling over and wagging her tail, as if she understood that these two girls, who had once been so lost, were now finding their way together. "I'm so glad we decided to share her," Sophie said, glancing at Isabella with a soft smile. "Zoo helps me feel closer to Rex again." Isabella nodded, her voice steady. "She's teaching me how to talk about Luna without feeling like I'm betraying her. She helps me remember." The families shared a quiet moment of reflection, the weight of their shared journey settling over them like a warm blanket. It wasn't just Zoo that had healed them. It was the connections they had built, the bonds that had formed from their shared grief and their shared love for the dogs who had shaped their lives. But even as things began to settle, the pressure of the community's judgment loomed overhead. Margaret Wilson, a vocal critic of the shared custody arrangement, had been working tirelessly to dismantle the program. She believed that the experiment had gone too far, that allowing two families to share custody of a dog would only create chaos and instability. The community had rallied behind Margaret, and soon, it felt like everyone was against the families. The Winters and the Martinez families were no longer seen as the brave ones taking a chance on love. They were seen as irresponsible, as people who had made a reckless decision that was now threatening the very fabric of their lives. Emily felt the weight of it all. She had spent her career working to give animals second chances, to help people find healing through their pets. But now, she was fighting not just for the families, but for the very idea of second chances. And it was a battle she was determined to win. The day of the city council meeting came. Emily stood in front of the room, her voice steady as she presented the case for the shared custody arrangement. She spoke of Zoo's unique ability to connect with both girls, of how the dog had helped them heal in ways no one could have predicted. "This isn't just about saving one dog," Emily said, her voice rising with passion. "This is about showing the world that healing doesn't always follow the path we expect. Sometimes, it takes the courage to take a chance, to let love multiply instead of divide." The room was quiet as Emily finished her speech. For a moment, it seemed like no one was listening, like the weight of the opposition was too heavy to overcome. But then, something unexpected happened. Mrs. Henderson, an elderly neighbor who had witnessed the healing power of the family's bond, stood up. Her voice was shaky but filled with conviction. "I've lived in this neighborhood for 40 years, she said, her gaze sweeping across the room. "I saw Sophie grow up with Rex. I watched her almost die that day, and I watched Rex save her life. And now, I see these two families who have lost so much finding a way to heal through love. If that's not worth supporting, I don't know what is." Her words sparked something in the room. Slowly, others began to speak up, sharing their own stories of how they had witnessed the transformation in both girls. One by one, the community began to see that the shared custody arrangement wasn't about chaos. It was about healing, about giving two families the chance to rebuild their lives after loss. Margaret Wilson, who had been silent throughout most of the meeting, finally spoke. Her voice was sharp and defiant. "This is a mistake," she insisted. "These families can't handle the responsibility of caring for a dog. They're just trying to fill the emptiness inside them." But Emily was ready. "Sometimes we don't just need to be filled," she said, her voice unwavering. "Sometimes we need to learn how to heal. And that's what this is, a chance for both families to heal with Zoo's help." As the meeting drew to a close, it was clear that the tide had turned. The city council, once determined to shut down the shared custody program, now found themselves questioning their stance. They had seen the power of Zoo's love, the strength of the bond between the Winters and Martinez families. It wasn't a perfect solution. There were still challenges to face, still doubts to overcome. But one thing was certain. Zoo had given them all something they hadn't thought possible, a way forward. As I reflect on this story, I'm reminded that healing doesn't always happen in the way we expect. Sometimes, it requires taking risks, stepping into the unknown, and trusting that love will find a way. Whether through the unconditional love of a dog or the support of a community, healing is possible, even in the face of loss. What do you think about the story? Have you ever experienced a situation where healing came from an unexpected place? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe to HeartForce for more inspiring stories.